going on, Bengals fans? Happy Monday to you. Stone Shields on hand for another edition of Bengals Breakdown. And coming up on today's show, we're going to be spending some time talking about Zac Taylor's search for a new offensive line coach. Obviously, the defensive coordinator search has been well documented. We've talked about that a lot here on Bengals Breakdown. We're going to continue to talk about that as well. But I would argue the offensive line coach is almost just as important, if not even more important, than the defensive coordinator. So we're going to be talking about some candidates for that role here on today's show. Also, Zac Taylor has made 2 more staff changes, according to Charlie Clifford of NBC Channel 5. We'll see if this ends up being true. I assume Charlie is correct here, but I haven't really seen anything else reported outside of what Charlie Clifford has said. So we'll talk about those 2 changes, and also a particular Bengals legend that certainly is all over the media these days. He had some remarks for Zac Taylor in terms of what is to come and the expectations for Zac Taylor in 2025. We will break down those comments at the end of our show. Before we get into that, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up icon for us if you have not done so already. As mentioned previously, earlier in the month, we are in a like battle with our Alabama football report here at Chat Sports. Both of our shows, Bengals Breakdown and the Alabama Football Report, are run out of our Chat Sports Cincinnati offices, so we figured we would have a like battle this month. Off to a good start, but make sure we are keeping up with that. Hopefully we can create some more distance between ourselves and Chris Daughtry, who's producing for me today over at the Alabama Football Report. All right, so around the corner, we're going to be talking about the 6 candidates that SB Nation listed as potential candidates for the Bengals offensive line coach. Haven't seen, a ton of people talk about this. Obviously, it's not like a coordinator search or a head coach search or a GM search, but for this Cincinnati Bengals team, this offensive line coach is very, very important because Frank Pollock, he was here for 5 years, was never really able to do anything, and it was like early Marvin Lewis years by, the time that you really had really good offensive line play. I believe you haven't had a top 10 O-line since like 2007, which is just absolutely ridiculous. So hopefully the next guy that comes in is ready to raise the bar a little bit at that coaching spot. First guy we are going to be talking about is Doug Marrone. He certainly is the most well-known guy on this list. Marrone has been around football for a really long time, and he's a really highly respected guy, not only around the NFL, but also the collegiate ranks as well. He was the Buffalo Bills head coach for 2 years. That didn't exactly pan out the way he was hoping. Obviously, only a 2-year tenure with Buffalo. Was the Syracuse head coach, by the way, before that. And he went to Jacksonville immediately after that. He was the offensive line coach, assistant head coach, was then the interim head coach, and then they gave him the job, and he was there for 3 or so years as the Jaguars head coach. Didn't have a ton of success there, but was able to stick around for a little bit after getting relieved of his duties in Jacksonville. Came to Alabama for 1 season as the offensive line coach. I thought did a nice job there for the most part for the Crimson Tide. And then the past couple of years, he was the Saints offensive line coach, but he was not in coaching in 2024, but certainly a guy that the Bengals might want to target. He has been around the block. He is a big name. He has a lot of credibility, and he's a guy that could come in and potentially help your offensive line get to where you want to be. Leads to the pinned comment of today's video. Who do you want as the next Bengals offensive line coach? Give me a name. Again, talking about 6, thanks to our friends over at SB Nation on today's show. But let me know who you would like as the Bengals' next offensive line coach. That ad comes here on YouTube. That's totally fine. Take advantage of it. Get down in the comment section and let us know what you think. All right, next guy here is Dan Roushar. Apologies if I'm not saying that name correctly, but he is another potential candidate for the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line coach. His history in recent years was the offensive coordinator at Michigan State up in East Lansing for a couple of years, and then he spent a ton of time with the New Orleans Saints. He is a Sean Payton guy. I respect the heck out of Sean Payton. I think he is one of the best coaches in the NFL. So if you got a Sean Payton guy, I am always interested. After Payton left in 22, Roushar then left as well, and he has been the Tulane offensive line coach for the past couple of seasons. Again, Sean Payton guy, been in the league for a long time. He wore several different hats with New Orleans, not just an offensive line coach. I believe he was a running back coach and a tight end coach, run game coordinator as well. This is a guy that has worn different hats, as I mentioned, and could potentially be another guy for Cincinnati at that OL coach spot. Now, let's get to James Cregg. And this guy certainly is very, very interesting when you talk about James Cregg potentially being the offensive line coach for the Cincinnati Bengals. Why? Well, he was the offensive line coach in 2019 for the LSU Tigers. Obviously, that was Joe Burrow. That was Jamar Chase. They were winning a national title, and he was a part of Ed Orgeron's staff helping that come to fruition. If you remember, Burrow was well protected that whole season. Obviously he made some great plays in the pocket for LSU and extending plays off script stuff that we've seen him do obviously here in Cincinnati. But that offensive line play was really, really good for Burrow in 2019. Also as an assistant offensive line coach with Denver, won Super Bowl 50 with Peyton Manning. So this is a guy that has a lot of credibility as well. Not a great year with Vegas in 2024, but they kind of just were a dumpster fire altogether. The reason why there is intrigue with a guy like Cregg is because of that relationship with LSU and Burrow and Chase. Do you want to get another familiar face into the building for Joe Burrow? Certainly something Zac Taylor has to consider. Couple of more candidates here. Joe Rudolph is another guy that I really, really like on this list. He currently is the offensive line coach for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And obviously they have a national championship a week from today against the Ohio State Buckeyes. Rudolph was a longtime assistant at Wisconsin. Was also an offensive coordinator there during that stretch. Spent a year at Virginia Tech in the past couple of seasons at Notre Dame. I'm really interested to see how Rudolph does on Monday night because I believe he's going to be without his starting tackle, and there might be another starting guard that is out for the Irish as well. That Buckeye pass rush is obviously suffocating. So if Notre Dame can go out there and protect Riley Leonard and have success running the football, that might be it for me. National title game, biggest stage. I might be ready to hire Rudolph there right on the spot if they are able to play admirably against the Ohio State Buckeyes. By the way, the longer these searches go, obviously Zac Taylor is going to do his due diligence because these are the biggest decisions of his career to this point. But the longer they go, the more I think there's a chance that you could see a guy like Rudolph or Al Golden be a part of this Bengals team because their season, of course, is still going in the collegiate ranks with Notre Dame. We'll see after Monday if either one of those guys have spots on the Bengals staff. We'll continue with our show here in a moment, but first, I want to give a shout-out to our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the sponsor of today's show. Really would encourage you guys to get over to Game Time and perhaps get you some NFL postseason tickets. You can see a ton of great games. I guess the game last night certainly came down to the wire with Washington and Tampa Bay, but usually the divisional weekend is really the best football weekend of the year. Really encourage you guys to go over to Game Time, check out those deals. Also, if you want to go down and check out the national championship game that I was just talking about between Ohio State and Notre Dame, you can do that with Game Time. Still some tickets available for that game in Atlanta, and of course, Red Spring Training right around the corner. I personally am very, very excited about that. My two favorite features on Game Time: the seat views. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy with Game Time. Secondly, the all-in pricing. Toggling this feature up front allows you to see your total up front so you don't get hit with any of those surprise fees at checkout like some of those other ticketing companies can get you with. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, a couple of more candidates here before we move on with today's show. Nic Cardwell currently is the offensive line coach for the Cincinnati Bearcats. I think the only reason they threw him on this list is because of that connection to the city of Cincinnati. Has he done a decent job? Maybe over the past couple of years. I'm not really sure. He's only been there for a couple of years. Was at Louisville and Appalachian State before that. I think the only reason you see him on this list is because he is a Cincinnati guy currently, as he is a coach of the Bearcats. And Jim Harding, I am interested in Harding as well. I feel like, Kyle Whittingham and what he has done at Utah has been really impressive, and he has been there forever, and Jim Harding has been there with him forever. So if he is ever ready to make that jump to the NFL, I'd be surprised to see him do it before Whittingham retires. But Harding's a guy that has been the right-hand man for Whittingham at Utah, and I would love for him to come to Cincinnati and be the Bengals offensive line coach. All right, let's talk about that news that Charlie Clifford was talking about yesterday, saying that the Bengals senior defensive assistant Mark Duffner and defensive quality control coach Louis Chofie also will not return to the team next season per source. That makes 5 departures for Cincinnati's 2024 staff on the defensive side of the ball. Do want to make note that I haven't seen any other beat reporter bring this up apart from Clifford, but we trust Clifford. He does great work covering the Cincinnati Bengals, so I am going to assume this is true. Duffner has been with this team for a long time, going back to the late 90s, and there the first couple of years of the 2000s, I believe 2000 to 2002 was the DC, bounced around the league there for a couple of decades before returning to Cincinnati, with Zac Taylor in 2019. And Chofie has been with the team a long time as well. He came in with Duffner there, worked under Duffner when Duffner was the DC. He then stuck around all the way to 2010, spending some time there with Marvin Lewis, and then Zac Taylor ultimately brought him back in 2021. And I think, the reason I'm bringing this up is because these are guys that have been in the building a long time here with this organization. They're really respected, and Zac Taylor opted to get rid of these guys as well. And they don't really have, massive roles because they're not a position coach and they're not a coordinator. And Taylor still opted to move off of these guys. He's doing a complete remodeling of the defensive side of the ball and his staff. And hopefully he makes the right decisions with leaving these guys. If you remember, Duffner was a guy in that Super Bowl run, kept saying that, what was he saying? They got to play us, right? He kept saying that after every single win that kind of went viral or whatever. So if you're a casual fan, you might recognize that about Duffner. But these guys have been here for a long time, and Taylor opting to move off them, according to Charlie Clifford. Another opportunity for you guys to get involved with our show here at Bengals Breakdown. How hot is Zac Taylor's seat in 2025? Scale it for me in the comment section. 1 on the low end, 10 on the high end. All right, next we're going to be talking about some comments that Andrew Whitworth, who of course is a Cincinnati Bengals legend at that tackle position, made in regards to Zac Taylor. So let's dive into the quote, and I'll give you guys my thoughts kind of on the situation. Whitworth said, I believe this was a podcast with Ryan Fitzpatrick, once you start making those changes, they got to work because now it starts to fall back on you. How they start the year and the way it goes is going to fall on Zac Taylor. It really will tell the story of what is going to be possible of this Joe Burrow-led Bengals organization. How do they handle T. Higgins and Jamar Chase with contracts and how they move forward? This is a big year for Zac Taylor and the Cincinnati Bengals. I think this is spot on from Andrew Whitworth, who, like I said, is a Bengals legend. I love Andrew Whitworth. Was the last year when he beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl with the Rams kind of awkward? Yeah. Did I dislike him in the moment? Sure. But he's a Bengals legend. Should be a Ring of Honor guy at some point at Paycor Stadium. And usually when he talks Cincinnati Bengals football, he makes really, really good points. And back to his point, we're going to find out a lot about Zac Taylor. I know there's a lot of people that absolutely dislike Zac Taylor, and there's people like me that absolutely love Zac Taylor, but the reality of the situation is it probably should be somewhere in the middle. And based on this 2025 season, we're going to learn a lot about Zac Taylor. At some point, you got to worry about whether or not he's going to lose the trust of Joe Burrow if they keep starting off as slow as they have in recent years. Burrow says he loves Zac Taylor, and he wants Taylor to be his coach for his entire career. I really hope that is the case, but that might change if the Bengals miss the playoffs once again. This isn't a team. When Joe Burrow plays every single game and is healthy, you cannot miss the playoffs. You just can't do it. Did you see Tom Brady when he was healthy miss the playoffs, or Peyton Manning? No, these things don't happen. And yes, I am putting Joe Burrow's name up with all-time greats like Manning and Brady. These hires are absolutely massive for Zac Taylor, the offensive line coach and the defensive coordinator. Biggest decisions of Taylor's career to this point. Hopefully, the guys that he are bringing in at that offensive line coach spot and the defensive coordinator spot can help with the slow starts, which obviously plagued the Bengals here this season. Taking a look at the Bengals in September under Zac Taylor. Not good and not good at all. That simply has to get turned around. Credit Zac Taylor for already coming out saying they're going to make some adjustments to how they handle training camp and the preseason, but lots of things need to change because they cannot afford to keep starting out this slow. They had a couple of years where they did it, and they still were able to get hot at the end and bounce back, and they still got hot at the end here in 2024, but ultimately it was too little too late because of those slow starts. Has to get turned around in 2025. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button if you have not done so already. When the Bengals and Zac Taylor make a decision on the defensive coordinator, as well as their linebackers coach, their defensive line coach, the offensive line coach, all the hires that he has to make, we will have a video for you guys. Don't miss out on any of our coverage here at Bengals Breakdown. Hit that sub button, youtube.com/BengalsTV.